Vulnerability means having enough trust to be able to let yourself be you
Mhm.
and not be afraid of what happens.
Hey, beautiful. Welcome to Naturally Empowered Living, your safe space to guiding you on your unapologetic self awakening journey. This is your weekly sanctuary for waking up from autopilot and transforming the way you approach life through the power of meditation, energetics, and root cause therapy. It is my mission to help you heal unprocessed emotions and release stuck energies by alchemizing your struggle cycles into opportunities for deep self love, awareness, trust, and connection, to return to your innate essence of being, stepping back into your energy of alignment. Because here, we honor all parts of ourselves, the messy and the magic, the shadows and the light, embodying all parts that make you, you. So if you are ready to get to the root of cultivating real change, get cozy, grab your journal and maybe favorite crystals, and let's discover our power within together. Hello, hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of the Naturally Empowered Living podcast. This is your host, Jenna Smith, and today's guest is someone whose presence you may have seen on screen at one point or another, whether reporting from the heart of breaking news, interviewing world leaders, change makers, or bringing stories to life from New York City all the way to the deserts of Mongolia. I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to just hear your story. So, Jane Hanson is a 9-time Emmy-winning journalist who spent decades anchoring the news for NBC and interviewing people from presidents to everyday people simply making an impact. So, I am so excited to talk to you here, Jane, on the show just to really hear about your mission and hear about how you've kind of transformed your viewpoints, or not even viewpoints, but just transformed where you were in that spotlight, speaking, being such a just well-known journalist to now bringing that presence, clarity, and heart to a newer mission of helping entrepreneurs, authors, business leaders, people in general, just showing up with confidence, whether on camera, on stage, or simply just being themselves. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much, Jenna. I really appreciate that. And you come from the heartland of the United States, which is where I came from too, from a little tiny town in rural Minnesota where everybody was my cousin.
Yeah.
Maybe that happened to you too. I don't know. But I bring that up for a very specific reason, which is I think that because of those close communities that you grow up in, I think it gives you a sense as you age and as you go out into the world of of developing a sense of community no matter wherever you are.
Mhm.
Could be right, could be wrong, but that's my interpretation of the way that I was brought up. So,
Yeah.
uh, and that's a discussion for us to have at another time.
Yeah.
But it um, I have had an amazing, wonderful career, and I know that when I moved to New York City and worked at 30 Rockefeller Plaza for the NBC networks, I was young, was in my early 20s, and I moved from a little tiny town to the biggest town in America.
Mhm.
And that was in and of itself a little daunting, but it also was an incredible adventure. And it was exactly what I wanted to do and where I wanted to live my life. I wanted to watch history being made before my eyes, and it was.
Mhm.
And that is where I think I learned so much and learned enough to be able to maybe, I like to think I've gained some wisdom, but again, that's all in the telling
Yeah.
and the learning, as we all know. So you talk a lot about empowering people and in particular empowering women. And I do a lot of work now as a coach in helping women learn to find their value and their power.
Mhm.
And I think it's something that it takes us a while to figure it all out. And sometimes we don't value ourselves as much as we should
Mhm.
because women are really pretty incredible creatures. Especially now in today's world where we work outside of the home, we work inside the home, we're the heart and soul of the family. We are literally, if you think about a corporation, a woman in a family runs the corporation. She's the CFO, the CEO, the COO, the marketing manager, the um, the salesperson, the budgeter, you name the whole list.
Hmm.
And the capabilities that women have are just absolutely amazing. So I just like to commend all of the people who might be listening and I want them to understand just who and what they are and how much they really accomplish on any given day. Because without us, without women, where would the world be?
I know, I know. Let's just take that second to just be and just like soak that in because it's a lot because we're always looking for the next thing on the to-do list. Oh, here I'm mom at this moment, and now I have to go back to work or whatever that is to come back and just cherish that. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy thing when we think about it, but we
Mhm.
are it's just who we are. And women, amazing multitaskers.
Yeah.
Uh, some days, some days at the end of the day, I'll go, "What did I accomplish today?" And I'll think, "Ugh, yesterday was one of those days where I just literally everything I touched. I know you've had these days. Everything you touch kind of fell apart. Like you had a phone call, and it was one phone call led to another, to another, to another, to another, and you didn't get anything accomplished. And you're going, or maybe one text or whatever it is." And then at the end of the day, I said, "All right, you're going to sit down and you're going to write three things you accomplished today." And I actually had a list of like 14 by the time
Yeah.
I finished. So
Yeah. I know it's those expectations that we give ourselves. Maybe you wanted to finish XYZ and then it's like, wait a second. Like when my cousin, oh my gosh, my husband, when my husband, maybe because the beginning of the conversation, that's funny. When my husband comes home for work, he always asks me, like, how was your day? What'd you do today? Da, da, da. And so often I catch myself like, I didn't finish everything I wanted to. And it's like, wait a second. Like he's that grounding force to be like, well, what did you do? Tell me. And then it's like I rattle off all these things. He's like, okay. Yeah.
you did it. You did it.
Yeah.
But um, what you mentioned a couple of the things that I've done in my lifetime in a career as a journalist, which was pretty hefty, heavy duty,
Yeah.
pretty fun, and a lot of great things. So let me tell you a little story about my trip to, you said Mongolia. So
Yeah.
I was doing a show for NBC at the time, and that was all about New York City, and it came out of 9/11 because after 9/11, New York was just in a horrific place. People weren't coming to visit. There was a lot of fear. There were ashes all over. Downtown Manhattan was a wreck. We were obviously living in this place of feeling tremendous sorrow for what had happened. Almost everybody knew someone who died
Mhm.
that day when there were 3,000 plus deaths. And I said, we've got to do something to revitalize the city. So I begged and begged and begged to do this show that I wanted to call Tonight in New York, and to really use it as a way of celebrating all the phenomenal things that New York City is. It's culture, it's people, it's geography, there's so much that happens on any given day in the city that they say never sleeps. And truly it never sleeps because I used to get up at 3:20 in the morning to do an early morning broadcast. And when I'd be out going to work at that hour, there are plenty of people still out or starting the day. So I can
Yeah.
tell you it truly never sleeps. Anyway, so it was determined that the show would be one where um, if I could find an association with New York, it was a one subject show, I could travel anywhere. Well, it just so turns out that I'm at lunch one day with some people at the American Museum of Natural History, which is a phenomenal place if you've never been there in New York. And they have rock star paleontologists. I mean, these are the greatest discoverers of our history, of our, animal and molecular history in the world. And so they were going on a dinosaur dig to the Gobi Desert of Mongolia. And I said, why don't we come with you? And so we did.
Mhm.
So we go into the Gobi Desert, which is about 700 miles from the capital, called Ulaanbaatar. And we get into because the Soviet Union, one of the reasons it was such a right place for digging for artifacts is that the Soviet Union had had it for many years before it unbecame the Soviet Union,
Mhm.
and they had never let anybody in there to explore. So this is so now you could go back and actually start hunting for, for things. So when the Soviets left Mongolia, they just left everything, including this very large helicopter that was like a cargo helicopter. And
Mhm.
so that's what we use to go into the desert because there are no roads. So we get inside this giant helicopter, and we've got in the middle of the helicopters a fuel tank because there are no gas stations in the Gobi Desert.
Mhm.
We had to carry our own fuel. And of course, everything in the aircraft is all in Russian, in the Russian language. And then the pilots are smoking, and and we gotta, and I'm going, I'd like to sign my death warrant.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? Anyway, we ended up in the desert for, I was only there for about 10 days, but we had to import everything. And the scientists had brought in these very large semi-trailer trucks that could actually travel into the desert. And of course, they had generators in them, and they had freezers full of food, and they had cases of fine wine, and they had everything, and including, of course, everything we needed to be able to dig and take the
Yeah.
stuff back. We had our camera crews, etc. So we get there. And we had a wonderful, I mean, it was really wonderful, even though it was about 110 to 120 degrees most of the time.
Mhm.
And we found four young dinosaurs, and they were all facing in one direction, which made it very clear there'd been a catastrophic event that had happened. But so we'd dig for dinosaurs by day, and at night we'd have these wonderful feasts that were made by these Mongolian women and have a little wine, and we'd sing with guitars. It was kind of like Kumbaya in
Yeah,
the
that's
middle
what
of
came
the
to my head.
desert.
Yeah.
So it was super fun, but it was a wonderful experience that I will never ever replicate again. And by
Yeah.
the way, not only are the stars the brightest you've ever seen, because there's no ambient light coming from anywhere,
Yeah.
but because there's also no noise, you could hear almost a whisper from a football field away.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I've got chills.
Yeah. So that was a wonderful adventure that I had. And
Yeah.
it taught me a lot about a completely different culture. There were some people that lived there they had gurs or they're, huts that are made out of camel skin for the most part,
Mhm.
that are nomads that live in the desert riding on their camels and
Yeah.
so that was quite an adventure. But there've been many, and all of them have been, stunning in their own way. And
Yeah.
they all teach you a lot.
Oh my gosh, I bet. And that it just sparked in me. I want to segue into another adventure, but like of you start growing up in a very small town, and then you mentioned this going, to the biggest, most populated, city in the US, and just kind of putting this full circle. Anywhere you live, it's a busy world. It's a noisy world. But for
Hmm.
you specifically, like, how did you transition in terms of feeling like empowered or feeling seen or being heard or valued, starting in such a small town? And now you're like, oh my gosh, everywhere I turn, there's probably as many people on the block that lived in my town?
Oh,
So
exactly.
how did you kind of transition to stepping into your authenticity and really owning like your truth and who you are in that city?
Well, it took some time, but it was something I really, really, really wanted to do.
Yeah.
I had the advantage of being on television,
Mhm.
which meant that I was exposed to a lot of things very early on, some of them marvelous and some of them frightening.
Mhm.
I went into neighborhoods that were neighborhoods I mean, because back then, this is a long time ago, New York was not as safe as it is today.
Mhm.
I remember one of my first uh, adventures with a camera crew. I was up in Harlem where there was a fire raging that was really affecting, uh, a very large housing complex, and there were people out on the street. And so I'm off trying to find people to talk to. And I went off by myself, which apparently I didn't recognize because I didn't know the danger
Mhm.
of that particular neighborhood. And as I came back to the live truck that we had, I can hear I can hear somebody frantically on the radio going, you've lost the new girl. So, so apparently I was not supposed to be out of somebody's company to make sure. I mean, it was fine, but there was a little fear about, I was just looking for people to interview because I was eager and I wanted to do my job well.
Mhm.
Um, what was interesting about it was the fact that there's a story that in New York City, there's a story on every street corner.
Yeah.
And there is. And I think there's a story on almost every street corner in America or almost in the world, because if you're willing to look for it, you can really find something. You can find an interesting person, an interesting tale. There might be something historic, whatever it is. There's a lot that goes on. So I used that to my advantage. I also knew that I was very young compared to a lot of the people that worked at this television station. They were veterans. They'd been around for a long time. I'm sure they looked at me and thought, what the heck is she doing here?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I chose to do early on was to speak to and to seek the advice of these veterans and people who'd been around a long time, be it covering a particular story and saying, look, I don't know the background.
Mhm.
Help me here. What's really important? What's the history? Or of saying, tell me how this works, or tell me what I'm doing right, tell me what I'm doing wrong. It was seeking advice.
Mhm.
And what I learned quickly was that instead of people saying, you go learn it for yourself, kid, they said, of course, we're happy to help you. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily do as much as we should, which is ask for help,
Mhm.
ask for advice. Lean on people who have come before you because they know the ways. A, it will save you time. B, it really helps create a bond of some sort. And it also, you just learn so much. And
Yeah.
so I really would encourage people, say you're going for a new job, say you're making a transition, say you honestly don't know your way around, whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that you're wise.
Mhm.
So that was another thing that really helped me. When I first got there, I know that the guy who'd hired me brought me into his office, and he said, "Welcome, you're going to love it here." Blah 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 blah. And beforehand, as we were negotiating a contract, etc., he told me how wonderful I was. And so I walk in the door, and he hands me a bunch of business cards, and I go, well, what are these? He goes, that's a voice coach. That's a stylist. That's a hairdresser. I went, I thought you loved me. He goes, oh, it's just a little polish.
I lost my words for a minute.
Yeah,
Huh.
just a little polish. So it was clear that I probably needed to up my game. And it was lovely. But at first I wanted to take offense, like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
me? And then I thought, don't be Don't be silly.
Yeah.
Just go for it. I mean, they're offering you this opportunity, go for it. And the other thing was that I worked really hard. The first day that I walked into NBC, and I don't know if you remember this name because has been gone for a while, but if you if you watched Saturday Night Live for a long time, there was um, a guy named Don Pardo who would always introduce the show. And Don and everybody knew his voice. So I got onto the elevator that very first morning, and he's in the elevator with me. And he goes, kind of like, hello, kid, what you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm starting work today, as a reporter for NBC. And he goes, where are you from? And I told him I was from Minnesota. He goes, you're going to be fine. I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, because you people from out there, you work really hard, you're tenacious, you're persistent. He said, you got a good heart. You're going to be just great. Mark my words, you're going to be fine. Good luck. And he got off the elevator. But
Oh,
I've never forgotten that moment. It was like serendipitous. It was somebody right there telling me in that moment, giving me a pat on the back saying, you got this.
yeah.
So never forget how your words can affect people either.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And you said a couple, I mean, just key points in terms of speaking to people or not being afraid to ask for help. that helps build your own confidence too. Because like putting yourself in my opinion, putting yourself in vulnerable positions,
Hmm.
you're putting yourself out there, but you're also building that trust and that confidence within you too, because you'll be able to get through it.
Right.
Yeah, and what you just said too, with like maybe it does take sometimes someone else to believe in you, but it's
Hmm.
like those words from someone else, and again, it instills within you, and oh yes, like what you just said with, your words matter. I have two little ones, so it's very much of like I tell them all the time, it's like your emotions are valid, but sometimes the actions are not acceptable. It's like that kind of that same concept in terms of everything matters that we do. But everything like it's still valid how you're feeling inside. Does that make sense? I don't know. It made sense in my head of like bringing that full circle.
No, no, it absolutely does. Because one of the biggest problems that I see, and I coach a lot of women, is we don't understand our own value.
Yeah.
And I'm equally as guilty of it. And I was guilty of it really when I left my job at NBC, where my identity had been so wrapped up in it, and then became my own boss,
Hmm.
created my own business. And we doubt ourselves. Doubt is a very big part of who we are as human beings. And trust me, everybody doubts themselves. And so, in those moments of doubt, we need to take a look at who and what we are, because we are no less or no more valuable than anybody else.
Hmm.
And so it's really it's understanding, yes, our emotions are valuable, but we have to learn how to use them
Hmm.
in the right way and not use them so that we overreact and that kind of
Right.
thing. That's all a
Yeah.
part of growing up
Yeah.
and becoming mature. But I really would like to encourage people to think about when you have those moments of doubt, just make a little list of three things. I like to think in threes. You don't have to, you can do two, you can do four, five, it gets out of hand. But just write down just a couple, three things that you're really good at.
Yeah.
And it's also a great exercise if you're thinking about making a transition in your career, if you're having some trouble in a relationship, all of those things, just focus for a minute on what your own value is.
Hmm.
We are so busy taking care of other people, and we're so busy thinking about, did I do the right thing? Am I am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that? That we fail to recognize what we really are good at.
Hmm.
And here's another little fun exercise. A lot of people aren't brave enough to do this, but pick five people. Could be parent, spouse, best friend, peer, coworker, relative, stranger, and ask them to describe you in a phrase or with an adjective.
Mm.
And when you do that, you are going to be very surprised, because you may think, I'm totally unorganized. And they're going to say to you, I love how you always make the plans.
Yeah.
And you go, I do?
Yeah.
Wow. Or they'll say, you're so thoughtful. And they're like, really? Or you always know the right thing to say. Whatever they tell you,
Yeah.
it's going to take you from here to here.
Yeah.
Because it reinforces that, because there are a lot of studies that show our perception of ourselves is 30% less than the way others perceive us.
Hmm.
So we are so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. Mm. Let's stay here for a minute because you say you have a message or a little quote, that's you're not starting over, you're starting different. And I loved that. When I read that, I was like, "Oh, I love that." So, how can you just staying kind of on this topic with like career change or transition, how can we approach change with, that grace, that trust, that confidence? You just those two examples or just practices were awesome.
Yes, I think one thing is to take the time to be reflective.
Yeah.
When something happens in our life, or we feel like we're overwhelmed, we need to make a change, whatever it is, we allow the overwhelmed part or the whatever happened part take over instead of sitting back and becoming reflective and asking yourself some really important questions, such as, what do I really want?
Yeah.
What do I really want? And I mean, really want. Doesn't matter if you think, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have this, I don't have, but literally, what do I really want?
Mhm.
Forgetting all of the considerations. And then, what am I really good at? And then the reverse is, what do I truly not want?
Mhm.
Now, for me, for example, what I wanted was freedom of time. Now, what does that mean? I worked in a business where we had absolute and complete deadlines. We had newscasts. I had to be on the air at a certain time every day. I had certain limits of time during which I could talk. I had, um, I had, my life in a certain sense wasn't my own in terms of time.
Right.
I wanted the freedom to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that. So that was really important for me.
Mhm.
Maybe other people don't feel the same way, but it's figuring out, what do I truly want? What do I want my life to look like? Because you can get there. So you ask yourself this series of questions, and it's about, what are my core competencies? And what do I absolutely hate doing?
Mhm.
Because you're not going to be happy if you have to go back to doing something you hated.
Mhm.
And then also, what's the what's the adventure I want? Is the adventure of moving? Is the adventure meeting somebody new? Is the adventure not driving the same route every day? Is the adventure, I mean, what's the adventure that I want? And then and writing that down. And then it starts to map itself out. All of a sudden you see a pattern, you see, it's becoming pretty clear. So if you take that time to reflect, and sometimes it takes some time. It takes days. It's not something you're not gonna do it for 15 minutes and go, I got it.
Yeah.
So, and we are not a very reflective society mainly because we don't have a lot of time.
Mhm.
So I really encourage, the people that I work with and the people that I know, and I get a lot of phone calls. I shouldn't say phone calls because actually it's more texts and emails and social media things, that from people who say, how do I make a transition and how do I make it the right one for me?
Yeah.
And and then and again, getting back to that other thing I started talking about, which is asking for help.
Mhm.
Ask people for help. They're very willing to give it. And it might be sometimes it's people you haven't talked to or seen in months, years. They show up out of the woodwork. It's like, I really want to do this. And I remember so and so had that as a hobby. I'm going to call them or
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out to them. And guess what? They help you. They
Mhm.
give you some ideas. So it's really making these decisions wisely by reflecting, by reaching out to people, by taking the time to do it, and by digging really deep inside yourself.
Yeah.
That digging deep is important.
It is, and I'm really thankful that this episode is going to air after my last two episodes. We talked about building the confidence within yourself, really stepping into your authentic truth, bringing in the polarities of humanity, how they could bring duality in the collective, in humanity, but we need to be confident in speaking our truth. And
Mhm.
something I talked about, it was either last week or the week prior. I talked about instant gratification, and you kind of dabbled a little bit because we live in such a busy, noisy world. We're always so busy. We never have time. But to take that time to connect with ourselves, what is more important than that?
True. And by the way, I am the queen of instant gratification.
Oh, I mean, we all, that's where we live. It takes a lot of intention to take that step back.
I so when you're in the news business, every day you're putting something on the air, it's always immediate, etc. And so it took me a long time when I left
Yeah.
that business to understand that A, I wasn't someone's first priority. B, I'm not going to get an answer in 5 minutes like I was used to getting. C, I just had to learn to sit still.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing to learn.
Oh, yeah.
But instant gratification doesn't mean that it's the right gratification.
Mhm.
It means that you got what you wanted or you felt you wanted in that moment, but might not be what you need. So if you study Buddhism or take a look at a lot of all of that kind of Eastern methodology, what you see is the consistent need to sit still.
Yeah.
So I would really talk about sitting still for a few moments. We are too overwhelmed. And in fact, there are days, I had one 2 days ago when I needed to shut the world out.
Mhm.
So I literally hid. I just shut off my phone. I was nowhere near my laptop. I went off to kind of this wellness spa place and I just sat there.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of people who reached out to me later and said, "Are you all right? What's the matter? Blah, blah, blah." I'm like, I couldn't, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And we do get overwhelmed. And I don't even think we recognize it until all of a sudden, until you get a day like I had, which was, I got to escape all of this.
Yeah.
Cannot look at another text. I cannot read another email. I can't listen to another story.
Mhm.
So do it, try it.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, on this show, like it's all like I understand we live in society. It's how to really harness those tools. And you brought so many amazing practices to this episode that I'm really excited and thankful that to bring that to the listeners. But it really does come back to what is most important. Like you are living your life. And to really come back to or step into maybe for the first time. I am working with someone in their mid 50s and she mentioned how she's like, I don't know if I've ever felt fully myself in my entire life. And that is a very vulnerable thing to say. And it's I'm getting tears in my eyes because it's a very beautiful thing at the same time to really have that awareness and come to that place of awareness for yourself. Oh, I'm crying.
I
And
love it. I,
yeah,
I, I want to use that word vulnerability for a moment
please.
because vulnerability is so important. When we are vulnerable, we are the most human
Mm,
of beings.
yes.
And vulnerability doesn't mean that you're blurting out your deepest soul things and that somebody's going to come and attack you for it.
Mm,
Vulnerability means having enough trust to be able to let yourself be you
mhm.
and not be afraid of what happens. So I just, and when you are vulnerable, your world changes
Mm,
for the better.
yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard because we're so not used to maybe saying the words that allow us to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And and so there's a fear that comes with it. Um, so do you read Brene Brown?
Well, that's who I thought of. Yes. When you said vulnerability and yep, I have a quote of hers on my website. Love
Yep.
her.
I because I do a lot of yeah, she's a big deal for me.
Mhm.
It goes directly against what everything is on social media. Because in social media, although you may see, look what happened to me today. That's not really vulnerability.
Right,
That's just trying to get attention
right.
or something. I don't know what it is. But when you actually allow what's coming out, what's deep inside, it becomes it frees you. I
Mhm.
mean, back to that notion of freedom. I mean, I talked about freedom of time, but I would love people to think about having the freedom to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Really amazing what happens.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So where can we find you? Where can we support you? What services do you offer?
I have a coaching service. My website is janehanson.com. My email is very simple. It's called jane@janehanson.com. And I offer all kinds of coaching. My coaching is all about communication. So it's all about how to communicate better. And a lot of it has to do with transitions in work, in any, just even being a good manager, being a good leader, I work with a lot of people that are in leadership roles,
Mhm.
and we talk about how can I lead people better, because that too is changing and it's changing dramatically, which is important. Um, and my favorites are, again, I love working with women, and I love women who are in very, very strong roles, who walk into a boardroom and say they feel like they're back in kindergarten.
Mm.
So I make them strong enough to be able to be um, in graduate school when they walk into that boardroom.
I love that. I had that visual as you said it, and that's such a good comparison. Yeah.
So there. So it's that's what I do. That's who I am. And love to speak to anybody anytime.
Yes,
So
thank you. Thank you so much. I'll share all of that in the show notes here of this episode. And to our listeners, just thank you for being here with us today. Jane, thank you so much for your time and space.
you're
And
very welcome. Have a wonderful day.
yes, you too. Take care. And to our beautiful listeners, until next week, as always, simply be you. You have everything inside of you to learn your energy of alignment and be unapologetic in who you are. We are sending our love and light.
Did you find this episode free or empowering? Please read my review. Tickle, 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 boop.
Thank you for spending the sacred time with me on Naturally Empowered Living. If this episode brought you closer to stepping into your energy of alignment, I'd love for you to leave a written review and share how this show has supported your journey. Your feedback truly lights me up and helps others find the space of transformation. And sharing it with someone who might need it spreads the ripple of healing even further. Be sure to check the show notes for ways to connect with me and explore personalized healing sessions and mentorships to deepen your self-awakening journey. Thank you. I appreciate all you are and all you do.